Messed up. It happened, Dwain. The Broncos are expecting to move on from backup running back Samaje Perine, which in and of itself isn't the biggest deal. The bigger question now becomes, where will Perine land? So not officially released yet. Allegedly, the Broncos are, talking to a number of teams about a potential trade. But Dwain, from Cincinnati to Dallas to even looking at other teams, Titans, Ravens, Browns, Chiefs, Chargers, Packers, Bills, Jets, not saying they're all interested, but there are a lot of depth charts where if you add someone like Perine, he goes ahead and carves out, 30, 40 targets, maybe 50 rush attempts. Again, it's not going to be the biggest swing in all of fantasy football, but Perine's going to really mess up one of these backfields.
Yeah, he can just be that nuisance. There's also some backfields that are so bad, like would it surprise us he's immediately the running back 2, and if something happens with the running back 1, he could be on the field more. So I've moved him up in the ranks just based on, we don't know the landing spot for sure, but I've put him basically in view where drafters are going to be seeing his name. So if you're now drafting today, you're going to suddenly see Samaje Perine in a spot where he would be draftable versus he wasn't before. Let's say he landed with the Cowboys, Ian. We're not expecting that to completely derail Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. But I mean, he's at least in the mix. How far up would you move him if he landed with a team like that where we've got so much uncertainty around the starters?
I don't know, like RB 55 or something like that, man. I don't think him going anywhere is going to change much. He couldn't make the Broncos roster. Last year, he actually got paid, and he was still someone that we barely even trusted in Fantasyland. I'm more worried about him going to somewhere like Dallas and taking away from someone like Rico Dowdle, taking away from someone like Ezekiel Elliott, and turning what we presume to be a 2 running back committee into 3. Because remember, Dwain, there's only so many workhorse running backs. We know we're not getting that, but once these committees get stretched from 2 backs to 3, that's when it gets more complicated. So Dallas wouldn't be ideal, but I think we all know the real concern here is a potential return home to the Cincinnati Bengals. The question would be, what version of Perine are we necessarily getting? Because yes, the last time we saw him there, 95 carries, 51 targets, that's problematic, Dwain. That said, 2 years before that, only averaged, 59 carries and 21 and a half targets per year. That's something that we see in a lot more depth charts around the league from your number 3 overall running back. So if we do see Perine end up in Cincy, am I right in assuming that this will be far more problematic for Chase Brown than Zach Moss? Because again, in that last year, 51 targets, but Johnny Manziel meme 0 carries inside the 5-yard line for Perine.
Honestly, I still think it's hard to say. Theoretically, that sounds right. The problem is, really, Zach Moss has been the long down and distance back, meaning you get into 3rd and long, you're likely to get a blitz, you're going to get man coverage. You want your most dependable back on the field to pick up the blitz. Perine has handled that role in the past, and Zach Moss has been handling that in practice. We've seen it some not in the preseason because he hasn't played, but we've seen that from him also in the past last year for the Indianapolis Colts. So I don't know. The good news is long down and distance, that's one of the least valuable plays, for running backs anyway. It just doesn't normally equate to fantasy points. The reason why, it's 3rd and 7. You're not checking it down to a running back that can't really make people miss. You're trying to throw the ball past the sticks. Second, like I mentioned, you're often getting blitzed. They have to stay in to pick up the damn blitz most of the time. So it's not really that valuable of a snap. So we would still prefer him to be on the field, right? We'll always want a player to be on the field versus being off the field, but I don't think it's absolutely huge. I think the biggest impact here, Ian, is just confidence now in this Denver backfield. I think we've got this thing isolated down to 3. I updated the projections this morning. I've got Javonte Williams now with 181 carries. You guys can check all of this out over at FantasyLife. 766 yards for Javonte. I've got him right now with 5 rushing touchdowns. Again, we don't think this offense is going to be that good, guys. Could Javonte score more than that? I know that sounds probably soft, as some might say. Sounds kind of soft on the projections there. But looking at an offense like this, it's hard to get overly excited about the touchdowns. But the utilization is probably going to be there. But man, Jaleel McLaughlin, I bumped up to 118 carries, 525 rushing yards. I've got him at 3 rushing touchdowns, but I've got him with 41 receptions. Javonte with 47 catches. That's the key, guys. The Broncos, we've got Sean Payton. He has a long history of getting his backs involved in the passing game. And then when you pair that with the fact that we really only have Courtland Sutton, that is it. That is the only option we have in this offense that we know can even go out there and earn any targets. And he's not an elite target earner. So they're going to do a lot to scheme up plays for these running backs. Now, I also gave Estime a bump here, Ian. I've got him up to a little over 12% of the team's rushing attempts. We had him down around 8. So yeah, I've took Perine out of the mix. He's out of it here. And then if you look at just the way these guys project, those numbers that I just gave you would project, just pure projections, would put Javonte Williams at running back 20 in my projection process. It would put Jaleel McLaughlin at running back 36. So these are guys that now we have more confidence, just because what you just said about Perine arriving on the scene over at Cincinnati, that's now gone from the Broncos. We're still giving Estime a little bit of work, but we don't have to worry about Perine stealing any of these targets, which is huge for both Williams and McLaughlin, because I don't think Estime is going to get many of those.
Broncos #1 in RB targets last year, 4th in expected backfield PPR points per game, despite only having the 27th ranked scoring offense. So I'm with Dwain. If you're not leaving a draft without a Broncos running back, not saying your team's dead in the water, but certainly some really good options out there for 0 and hero RB drafters alike. So those were the 2 big news items. And again, going to have plenty of